my shop is racing, right? It's a third name in my shop name. And so I love racing. Currently I'm racing bicycles, but that's a whole different story.
Yeah.
But I like
Equally competitive.
Extraordinarily
and
competitive. And bike racing is a different beast.
Side note, I learned that from when we were at the wind tunnel up in North Carolina.
Yeah.
Most of what they did was bicycles.
Yeah, I'm sure.
Just a guy on a bicycle for the wind tunnel. This was like thousands of dollars to rent an hour. And they were testing helmets.
I
just didn't understand that.
Well, as someone who rides 250, 300 miles a week, I can tell you all about it. But yeah, it's
a lot of carbon fiber on those things.
If I told you what my freaking race bike costs, you'd laugh. But it's carbon everything. It's all carbon.
If it's not carbon, titanium, and then
carbon, titanium, the crank's carbon. Everything. See, the saddle's 3D printed. Yeah. It's crazy.
I believe it. The wind tunnel blew my mind with that stuff. The wall of test parts and shoes and everything. Was cool.
I'll give you
I'm sure you can take a lot from that into different forms of racing.
Yeah. Well, I'll give you. So it's like this, right? When you're racing bikes, everything matters, right? Because the engine is relatively underpowered, right? You don't have horsepower. You have, very minimal, we talk in terms of watts. And so if you and I are the same fitness level, the same talent level, right?
Same weight.
Everything. And I've got aero improvements that effectively save 10 watts over a 40K race, which is, roughly 45 minutes or so. I'm beating you by 20, 30 seconds. Nothing you can do about it.
Yeah.
That little bitty saving, when you extrapolate it out over time, makes huge gains, huge difference. And so, these guys spend a lot of money testing to find a watt here, a couple watts there. It's, I believe it. That's cool that you saw the wind tunnel though. That's up my alley.
They were big on that stuff up there. I'm sure it's still big on that, but It seemed to me, I was like, okay, but there is a relative peak performance and then you're done. You do all this testing and it seems like you can get to where your drag is almost zero. And then I don't know, I don't see a big innovation. Human bodies you can only do so much.
Well,
on a race car, you can always kind of change a lot. Underbelly and stuff is so important.
And that you would be surprised what they figured out over the last 5, even 10 years. So consider this, right? Go look up, if you want to, but go look up Tour de France 1990.
Oh yeah.
And then go look up Tour de France this year, and just look at the equipment difference. Now UCI, which is the sanctioning body of cycling, Union Cycliste Internationale.
Oh.
That UCI is the NHRA of bike racing, and so.
So you pay a bunch of money for not really much, pay into it.
And you argue about the rules, yeah, more or less.
I love that. I'm in.
Yeah. And so, obviously they're based in Europe because, cycling is primarily European, but, they govern what a bike can look like and the minimum weights, et cetera. And those rules have not really changed much in 20 years. Mm-hmm. They're pretty similar. If you look at a bicycle, it's the same shape now as it was 20 years ago. But how are they so much faster? It's just the improvements they make, in body position and, the shape of the bars, the shape of the nose cone, the shape. It all matters, man.
Yeah. They don't even have a winner for the Tour de France's, do they? Didn't they take Lance Armstrong's away and then nobody else came into the second place guy lost 2 and then the third place guy lost his and
I would have to go back and check my facts. But it's funny, Lance Armstrong, he's a very what's the word? He causes a lot of opinion. Most guys either love him or hate him. Mm-hmm. Most people not many people who are into the cycling sport or into sport in general are in the middle. You either love him or you hate him. But the ironic thing is, yes, he was doping. Obviously, we know that. But you'd have to go back 15 or 20 places in the peloton of the years he was racing to find someone who hadn't been popped.
That's
for
what
doping.
I heard. Yeah, there's no winner if they take him out.
So yeah, he's a cheater, but they're all cheaters. And if the whole peloton's cheating, is it really cheating? So if you take away, do you know who Peter Attia is?
Yeah, he's the fitness. He's big on fitness. Yeah.
Yep. So he did a podcast with Lance Armstrong, and it was the first one that I've ever seen because Lance has done a ton of podcasts. But this is the first one where Peter point blank asked him, how much better were you on dope versus not? How much better, and what could you do? What's the difference? Dude, Lance lays it all out there. And so quoting Lance, it was 10%. right? So whatever you
That's
could
a pretty
do,
big percentage.
it's tremendous.
That's
There's a
pretty
10% gain.
Yeah.
You know, and so, you know, if we're talking numbers, right, it's a lot to go into, but we talk in terms of watts, right? So how many watts can you hold for X amount of seconds, right? That dictates how fast you are, right? If you and I are side by side and I can hold more power for longer, I win.
Yeah.
You know, there's a lot more to it than that, but that's the basics of it.
Yeah, you're gonna just keep pulling away from me.
And nothing
if we
you do-
start together and you
Exactly.
can 10% more, you're just gonna keep pulling away from me.
Yep.
And it's funny because I mean this topic does connect so much with just racing in general, where there's gray area, there's cheaters, there's you know, you can go back through races you've done and that guy was cheating and like he won. Like I've been there. I've been at races where I'm like, that guy did cheat, but I'm not one to go call somebody out on that. I don't really care enough. I got second place.
Yeah, I mean, I've been involved in a couple different discrepancies, and mainly about rules, and mainly about people not reading the rules
Yep.
and how you interpret the rules. You know, like
Event promoters not enforcing the rules
Right.
also happens. It's
Or-
across the board.
or an event promoter siding with the guy who's sponsoring the class on the rule set.
That is tough. That does put event promoters in a tough situation.
But it's political. Everything. It is what it is.
Yeah.
But you know, so I forget how he was on this, but the gain is like 10%, right? So if he can do 450 watts up a mountain, he can do 500. But he was a cheater. He's a doper, but they all were. So if you take away that, all it does is lower the whole playing field.
Yeah.
He's still better. He's still the champ. He's still the fastest guy of those 7 years. He just happened to be in the crosshairs, and you know, depending who you ask, I think pride is what cost him his championships. If he stayed away for number 7, that's it. But he came back for number 7 and got cocky.
Oh.
You know, yeah, he won 6, right? And then he left, and then he came back for number 7.
He couldn't just leave it alone.
And that's when, you know, there's a whole lot to it. A former teammate who was a known doper basically didn't get put back on the team. He got mad and then ratted Lance out, and that was the unwinding of the ball, and it went all downhill from there.
It's funny though, because if you go back far enough, like, you know, people always talk about this in NASCAR. They're like, oh man, he used to cheat so much. It was so cool. You know, if you just like the longer away from something, the more respect people gain for it.
Sure.
Like, what was it? Smokey Eunuch.
Yeah.
People brag about his level of cheating. Like they brag about it. They like
Right.
praise him for it because, you know, he'd do stupid things like a hidden supercharger driven off the drive shaft under the
Yeah.
car, and then he would do like nitrous in the roll
And
cages.
exactly in the
and
chassis.
people love it.
Yeah, it's phenomenal.
But now, you know, if it
Yeah.
happened yesterday at a NASCAR race, people would be up in arms.
Right. Oh yeah.
You just have to wait. It just takes time.
Yeah, and it's also an element of, you know, when it all happened, you know, it's all media coverage, right? And, you know, he just got caught up in his ego, and it cost him. But then, you know, 20 years later, you actually look back at the facts. It's like, well, yeah, he cheated, but the entire peloton cheated.
Yeah.
He was just the best of all the cheaters. They're still all cheaters. He's just the best one.
And nobody cares to call out number 15.
Yeah,
Like,
exactly.
why the heck are you going to waste your time
Exactly.
calling out the number 15? I mean, look at like old baseball. Look at like Barry Bonds.
Yeah.
The dude joined at like 200 pounds, and by the time he was over, he was like a 300-pound monster.
Dude,
Like he was scary.
What's more exciting? Baseball with guys on juice or not?
Neither, but I mean, I
Well,
would take the juice.
True. The home run derby with Barry Bonds and Mark McGwire, that whole chase, that was phenomenal to watch.
That was the only time baseball was like really peaked. I feel like is when people were max doped up and they were hitting balls the farthest distance
just
over out
crushing
of the
them, dude.
stadium.
Yes. Dude, I mean,
Over Fenway, out of a stadium is peak baseball.
yeah. These guys, I mean, like their shirts are ripping off their arms. It's like, you know, and they have to go in front of Congress and talk about it. It's like, I don't know, like you're a grown man. If you want to juice up, juice up. It's just TRT before it's time. That's all it is.
Yeah.
You know, just maybe a little bit more. Maybe you misjudged how much the needle was. Yeah, you know, but
Even with
I
like
don't know.
juicing, you look at like Hollywood celebrities.
Yes, they all do it.
I mean, if you look at like The Rock, he's like 60. He should not look like that.
And he denies it. That's
That
the
is a
funniest thing.
scary. That is a heart issue waiting to happen. 100%.
Dude's a monster, dude. Chris Hemsworth, Thor,
Yeah.
got asked about it. He lied and denied it. It's like, how do you put on 60 pounds of muscle in 4 months for a role?
The scary thing is that they hold it like that.
Yeah.
because you're supposed to cycle that stuff. You're not supposed to just perpetually never be off of it,
Right.
where your heart's just going to explode. And it's a crazy spot that they're in. Thankfully, in racing, most problem is just people out of shape.
Yeah.
Most racers are struggling to get out of their car.
Yeah.
We don't have a doping issue.
No. Ironically, not doping, but I got into cycling because the black car, it was as light as I can get it before I started cutting and doing major changes, right? Like we campaigned that car for years, right? We had, MBRP was our title sponsor and had AEM sponsored us. We had a bunch of sponsors. And so the car weighed, the lowest it got with me in it was like 3320, right? And at the time I was like 240 pounds and like had carbon doors, carbon roof, carbon trunk, carbon wing, light wheels. I mean, racing brakes. It had, had optic armor.
Yeah, you've gotten all the low-hanging fruit. You got all the mid-level fruit.
The next thing is cutting out the chassis. Cutting the floorboard. And
did it have a carbon roof at the time?
It did.
Okay,
it was one of the first ones. Yeah,
that helps a lot with 60 foot on those cars, right?
You know how much a carbon roof saved?
How much?
10 pounds. You know how much the carbon roof cost me?
Yeah.
Like $2,000.
Probably a huge pain in the ass to
Yeah.
put in. Hey, hit that subscribe button if you like what we're doing here and want to see this thing keep growing. If you want to help the channel, help all of us get the best guests we can possibly get, hit that subscribe button. It helps a lot. It goes a long way. Let's get to the video.